Welcome to the session. I think Mr. Agarwal ji, I understand that you are welcoming
Yeah,
everyone.
A very good afternoon to Dr. Arvind Varmani ji, Dr. Charan Singh, Sri Raman Agrawal ji, Sri Indranil Sen Gupta, Miss Upasana Bhardwaj, Miss Aarti Matu. The SOCHAM entered members and distinguished guests who have joined us to attend this timely and meaningful discussion. On behalf of SOCHAM, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you at the SOCHAM bi-monthly Shadow Monetary Policy Committee meeting discussion on monetary policy. We would like to thank the Honorable Governor for accommodative instance that has helped Indian industry tide over problems posed by the pandemic. We believe that the accommodative instance required to be continued so as to enable Indian industry recoup after this event. The availability of liquidity together with the loans secured by a credit guarantee have ensured that industries have been able to tide over the immediate problems. The banking system liquidity has been kept at nearly rupees 6 trillion, while the entire system liquidity, including government balances, continue to remain above rupees 8 trillion mark. And the RBI assurance so far has kept the rates ultra low for everyone, including for top rated private firms. The RBI Financial Stability Report mere showcases the bad loans at banks that can emerge under various scenarios and stress tests and the resultant impact on capital for these institutions. The criteria for routing repayments and disbursements through single escrow account may be relaxed for microfinance clients. Business, specifically MSMEs, may be able to repair their balance sheet faster if their interest cost could be reduced. We request RBI to consider a special lending window to bank against qualifying MSME loans that will reduce lending rates to these troubled entities. The capital structure, especially of SME, tends to be capital scarce. That is, balance sheets are often highly liquid. This makes these industries fragile, while the assistance provided has helped tide over immediate problems. Continuing accommodation is requested for these entities to repair their balance sheet. Withdrawing support too early will result in the needless demise of thousands of businesses. We are, however, conscious of the moral hazard this situation presents and are keen to work with the RBI to assist in addressing it. To make the economic work for the banks, such assets must be removed from ANBC for the purpose of computing PSL requirements. This will enable banks to factor in the absence of PSL induced negative drag and reduce spread accordingly. The, the restoration announcement and the act of restoring the normal timing for the window should realign short-term rates towards repo rate and above. It would be a very long time before the RBI gets back to its original stance of keeping liquidity contained at plus minus 1% of the total deposit base, which is roughly around about rupees 1.5 trillion surplus or deficit liquidity, depending upon the stance of the monetary policy. The RBI still carries on with an accommodative policy stance, and that too would likely not change before the second half of the calendar year. Some of the rollback in surplus liquidity is also expected to happen automatically as the 1 year cut in CRR reverses in April. As such, the direction is clear, although we believe RBI will endeavor to make it gradual and non-disruptive. Lower interest rates suggested above will reduce cost for the businesses and allow capital accretion, which in turn will reduce guarantee cost to the government. The removal of such assets from A and BC will enable banks meet societal requirements without making the government bear the total cost of such actions. Further developing of retail gilt and corporate bond market, allowing state development loans for repurchase transactions and provident fund trust to be allowed to invest in repo market will help in reviving the economic activity as well. As per the government is taking measures to build a self-reliant India, building a stronger infrastructure and social capital such as health of people and industries will drive resilience. Reforms and prudent policy measures and business strategies can put the economy back on track quickly. The core CPI inflation eased moderately to 5.5% in December 2020, broadly in line with the expectations driven by miscellaneous items. As the global and domestic demand expected to strengthen with the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines, the core CPI inflation may remain relatively sticky and display a limited correction going forward. The December inflation print coming within the RBI's target range of 2 to 6% may have given some comfort to the six-member Monetary Policy Committee, but it may not immediately open the door to rate cuts. At last, we expect the MPC to maintain status quo in the upcoming policy. The strong guidance of keeping monetary policy accommodative into the next fiscal year has so far helped keep sovereign yields below 6%. Consequently, notwithstanding the recent optimism on recovery, we still expect them to adopt a cautious tone, flagging uncertainty about the resilience of demand after the festive season and downside risks due to rising second wave of infection. There is a fine balance that the MPC need to strike in the current scenario between the growth inflation trade-off. For the sake of the economy and the growth impulses, we hope that the MPC may err on the side of caution and remain status quo on both policy rates and forward guidance in the upcoming policy. With these words, I would like to conclude my address and once again welcome you all and would now request Dr. Charan Singh to kindly carry forward the discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Arvind Virmani, Chairman of the IGRO Foundation, is chairing the session. So I'm requesting him to take over, please.
Thank you, Dr. Charan Singh. So let me make some remarks as usual, and then we'll go to the panelists. So the first thing, of course, is the backdrop of GDP growth, with the NAS declaring minus 7.7% growth for the current year, FY21. Of course, we have been saying a growth rate of between minus 7.5 to 5%, minus 5%, and we are still reasonably confident that it will be above minus 7.5, but it's not a big difference to be concerned about. Given that the government, of course, takes the NAS estimates and bases its projections on that, their projection of 11% for the next fiscal year is quite reasonable. We had, I think 2 months ago, I had said publicly, and this was reported by several agencies and newspapers, that I expect double-digit growth. And the 11% number which government has projected is consistent with the minus 7.7. Of course, if the growth turns out to be better than that, then the growth, correspondingly, the growth for next year could be lower than 11%. But I guess it's a good working assumption until there is a clearer or better numbers from the NAS, which I think will not come from till May now. So this is a good working assumption. On inflation, again, we had said, I think many of us had said, and of course our analysis had shown that there would be some supply-demand disruptions and imbalances in the economy, and that was likely to result in some inflation in certain parts of the economy and deflation. And of course, we had the usual seasonal vegetable price increase. But I think there was a little bit of surprise for all of us who were right by and large, but the delay in the reduction. But of course, finally now it's happened in the latest data. The inflation rate is the seasonal elements have asserted themselves and the decline. Now, having talked about the domestic supply chain disruptions and demand supply imbalances, I think I should refer to the external. I think the same thing is now happening externally, and I see this commodity price rise as an indicator of that. I don't think it's a indicator of overall excess demand. There are huge excess supplies areas in the international economy, but because the COVID has disrupted different countries, different areas of countries in different ways, there's a lot of confusion in the supply chain. So I really see this commodity price jump as part of this general disruption. For example, one has heard of a shortage of supplies of good quality packing material. And various very isolated, of course, everybody has noticed the semiconductor shortages, etc. So, because of the disruptions, the demand patterns, the supply patterns, they're all temporarily disrupted, and that will take a little bit of time to smoothen out. The third point I want to make is that given the reforms and the budget has clearly brought out that government will continue the broad policy stance, which again we have been saying in our research papers since February. We have had 7 different research papers. As Sharan will know, almost one every month. I mean, it's quite an incredible record. You should publicize it more often. But anyway, the reforms for reviving growth will also have a effect which needs to be noted. The capital inflows are already reviving. I think the capital inflows are going to be, there's going to be a surge of capital flows into the Indian economy. This was kind of delayed. I had projected this in my discussions with the governor last year, around the same time actually. But it was moderated last year because of all the disruptions in the Indian economy. But this year, I think, given the clear signal from the government, the series of reforms during 2020 and now in the budget, and the FM's assurance, he puts it in his own way. I mean, we may not take it literally, but his point about there being a series of mini budgets and probably more to follow, I expect these reforms to continue through the rest of the year. And therefore, for accelerating growth, and therefore the key capital inflows to continue. And that brings us to the third point, that this is going to clearly affects the monetary base and the liquidity situation. So one of the challenges before RBI is going to be how to manage the liquidity. Now we have, when we were in the tight monetary situation a year ago, again, we were the first to emphasize the issue of long-term liquidity and looking at the monetary base. Of course, now many observers, including I'm sure some of our panelists, are going to talk about the excess liquidity, etc. There are different perspectives, of course, and it's good to have all of them. So this is now an issue on the table, how the capital inflows will be managed to make sure that long-term liquidity remains good, but there's not an excess of short-term liquidity. So, well, that is what the RBI is all about. They have to do the management and take those decisions. The fifth point I would make is, a lot of talk on the that at the end of 3 years, I think, which is September. I think it's by September, a kind of review of the whole MPC targeting numbers, etc., etc. So, and I don't want to preempt anybody. I'm sure other people have other views, but I have gradually come round to the view that it would not be advisable to change the basic targeting framework of the flexible target of 4 plus minus 2% at this stage of the game, where the fiscal deficit is higher, where the trajectory of the fiscal deficit is now going to be much higher. than it was, 15 months ago or 2 years ago. So I think this is not a good time to change the basic framework. However, I think something like there are two issues which are worth thinking about and can be done pretty easily. One is a simple change or amendment which says that if GDP goes below its previous peak in any quarter and remains below this flexible, the band expands automatically. That means as long as GDP remains below the highest peak, it would require just a small amendment that this 2% will not apply. Maybe a 3% or 4% would apply. And the second part I think is worth thinking about, and again, it'll be good to have other views from panelists on the relative importance of core inflation. When we originally thought about this issue at the time of the original Raghuram Rajan committee, I was in the planning commission when we had set up this committee. Then of course I moved out to finance ministry. But the point was that the non-core elements, food and fuel, are very important for the poor in India. So that it may not be appropriate. At that time we had thought that it's better to focus on the total inflation, because that's really what affects very strongly a large proportion of the population. But now, 20 years later, with improvement, reduction in poverty, etc., or 15 years later, I forget the exact amount, but the issue of giving more weight to core inflation than to just a nominal one, I think is worth thinking about and considering. And finally, given the fiscal trajectory, which is likely and which is probably consistent with what the Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission said. I haven't seen any of the reports. The FM mentioned it, but I haven't read any elements of that which is in public. But the same issue will confront the FRBM, and I think the same point I made with respect to MPC's flexible targeting kind of applies to this. I think the FRBM target should automatically go into abeyance when the GDP is below its previous peak. But then, of course, as far as the trajectory of the debt GDP ratio is concerned, it's still an issue, which I think probably we'll have to wait to see what the Finance Commission said to form the basis of the debate. Okay, with that, let me turn to our first panelist, which is Shri Raman Agarwal, Co-Chairman, ASSOCHIM National Council for NBFCs and Co-Chairman FIDC. Shri Agarwal.
Thank you, Dr. Virmani. So I would like to present the NBFC's perspective, since I represent the NBFC sector. Just few quick points. We've been, and I think Dr. Virmani touched upon the liquidity. Sir, while yes, all those measures which were taken by RBI and Ministry in the recent past have resulted in a good amount of liquidity flowing even to the NBFC sector, but that has been concentrated to a handful of the high-rated large NBFCs. And a large number of small NBFCs continue to struggle. That's primarily because of the factor of, a very important factor of credit rating. Now, let me put some very interesting facts on the table. The RBI annual report on trends and progress in banking, it has clearly reported that 70% of the funds invested by banks raised by banks through the TLTRO were invested in the NBFCs which were rated AAA and above, and AA and above, and 17% in AAA and above. So meaning 88% of the funds through the TLTRO window went into the NBFCs which were rated AA and above. So that clearly vindicates the point which I am making, that the liquidity got concentrated in a handful of large NBFCs which are rated AA and above, and a large universe of the NBFCs which are rated below AA still continue to struggle with the liquidity front. Secondly, I am drawing a cue from what the economic survey has said. And I think to that extent, they've gone to the extent of saying that why not even to an extent ignore what the international credit rating agencies have been doing in terms of the sovereign rating, because at times they do not tend to present the actual picture. Now, that's a far-fetched thing, but why I'm drawing this example is because, sir, if we look at the fundraising avenues available to NBFCs today, in every aspect, credit rating becomes an eligibility criteria, meaning unless I have the minimum prescribed credit rating, I am ineligible to raise funds. So whether it's a TLTRO window, whether it's the partial credit guarantee scheme of the government, whether it's the special liquidity scheme of the government, whether it's raising public deposits for NBFCs which are allowed to raise deposits, even when NBFCs approach funding from banks, banks tend to insist on a minimum level of external credit rating. Now, rating has become a quasi-regulatory parameter, a basic eligibility criteria. I think this needs to change, because rating, of course, it has to be one of the parameters. We need to look at the other financials. If you look at the capital adequacy ratio, even the RBI financial stability report and the trends in progress report clearly say that the average capital adequacy of the NBFC sector continue to be above 22-23%. So there is no dearth of, there is no question of being undercapitalized to that extent. And even the asset quality, in spite of whatever COVID has done, the lockdown has done, the RBI report clearly indicates that the asset quality has not suffered to the extent, and there has been a sufficient robustness shown in the sector when it comes to asset quality. So the larger point here is that perhaps there is a need to have a serious relook of having credit rating being the sole determining factor when it comes to fundraising. I think that's a very, very important point. Continuing with that, there are certain incentives which need to be, I think, given encouragement. Especially the arrangement of bank lending to NBFCs for on lending to priority sector, because that is something which used to work very well till 2011 and was stopped. Currently, there is a 5% window carved out for this purpose. I think there is a strong need to enhance this limit to enable, on one hand, bank meet their PSL targets, and it enables NBFCs to be able to source funds at reasonable rates from the banking sector, and it incentivizes banks even to look at some of the small and mid-sized NBFCs. That's as far as the liquidity is concerned. Then next, I think very important point, because I'm drawing up again parallel. We saw a recent discussion paper put by RBI on the entire gamut of revising the regulatory framework for NBFCs, and there RBI is talking about different layers of NBFCs and having a graded system of regulation and strengthening the regulation, bringing it almost at par with banks when it comes to the upper layer or the top layer. Fine. But I think what the larger point here being missed out is that what about certain benefits which banks enjoy and NBFCs do not? Nobody talks about them. Now, I think this has to be a comprehensive package. So when I say this, there are certain benefits in terms of recovery. There are certain benefits on taxation front, which clearly banks, simply by virtue of being bank and not NBFC, they enjoy it. And NBFC, simply because it's an NBFC, don't get those benefits. That should be an automatic giveaway if we are bringing a regulatory framework at par with banks. Then we need to have a level playing field on other fronts also. This should be there. I'll give you one classic example. We saw in this budget also, there was a talk of limit event, so under the SARFAESI Act, if NBFCs are today to enforce security under SARFAESI Act, there is a threshold limit that the minimum ticket size of the loan has to be 50 lakhs. Now it has been reduced to 20 lakhs in this budget. Now we feel this is imprudent, because when you're talking of lending to MSMEs, why have this kind of an arbitrary limit prescribed? For banks, there is no such limit. So this one classic example. There is another on the taxes front, which I need not elaborate. So I think this is the two key points I want to highlight at this stage, because, I think enough of talk about strengthening regulations, further tightening regulation of NBFCs. That's fine. I think NBFCs don't mind being regulated, but I think the larger point of the associated level playing field in terms of certain benefits also need to be looked at and be part of a comprehensive package. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Our next panelist is Shri Indranil Sengupta, Chief Economist, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. Indranil.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So we are looking at a pause by the RBI MPC on Friday, and thereafter through the entire financial year. And then we are looking at a hike of 100 basis points in FY23. Now, when we look at growth, we see a contraction of 6.7% this year. That's FY21, followed by a increase of 9% next year. Now, this kind of assumes that the vaccine is at least rolled out significantly by June. Now, our increasing view is that the mass rollout of the vaccine will stretch towards December. And if that happens, then growth can get right shifted so that you see 6% growth next year. Maybe FY23 growth is higher. So, this actually is more up on the pharma analysts are saying. Economists have a scope here. So on inflation, we are looking at inflation going back up a bit to about 5% because prices of vegetables have risen. But it's a very unclear picture because, on the one hand, because of bird flu, you have a big drop in the price of chicken and eggs. On the other hand, prices of fish seem to have gone up again, and fish and mutton have gone up. So, so it's a slightly unclear picture, but anything between 4.5% to 5% is what probably we'll see, and that is what will probably average for the year. I think after the fiscal deficit was raised, we actually took off our RBI rate cuts because if you are going to have a fiscal stimulus of this order, then somewhere monetary policy has to step back. I think the big problem or challenge for the RBI is going to be funding the fiscal deficit at a time when US Treasury yields are set to rise. They're probably going to 1.75%, by the end of this year. Obviously that depends on the size and scope of the Biden stimulus, but I think they are calling for a $1.9 trillion stimulus. So if you look at the RBI, in the past we have all been calling for RBI OMO, which was easy because you were in a tight liquidity situation. Now you are in a situation where the money market has almost 2 years of durable liquidity. I mean, $40 billion a year, it's close to $80 billion. Money supply growth is running at 12% plus, when the average growth of FY20 to FY22 is going to be maybe around 2%. And finally, given that the current account deficit is likely to be somewhere in the 0 to 1% range, we think that the RBI will be able to buy FX. And indeed, the RBI governor has now changed the FX policy to saying that we want to build FX reserves for financial stability rather than control volatility of the exchange rate, and that is something I wholeheartedly agree with. So therefore, to funding the fiscal deficit without pushing up yields is going to be a challenge, and we think that the way out is to keep raising banks' HTM limits. So we think that we are calling for a 4% hike in banks' HTM limits now after the budget. Before that, we had a 2% hike. Because we think that is the only way you can incentivize banks to, funnel their money market surplus liquidity into GSECs. At least you take away the fear of, future increases in yield, which obviously is going to result in MTM hits. So, I mean, a very simple math that if you look at the situation today, you can either park money in the reverse repos maybe at 3%, buy GSEC at 6%. But if yields go to 7% 12 months later, then you have to book a loss of 7%. So, unless you have an HTM shield, why will you buy G6 now? It's so much better to wait till the bond yields go up and then enter, and invest, because you're otherwise going to, just invite losses for yourself. So therefore, we think that HTM limit hikes are the the new OMO, if you like, to fund the fiscal deficit. So net, like I said, that RBI pause. I'm sure the governor will again highlight that bond deals are a public good, that the market and the regulator should cooperate at these times and keep yields low. I think he and the RBI have shown enough, demonstrated their commitment to keeping bond yields low. But obviously, the challenge will get deeper and deeper, and therefore, we think that hike in HTM limits by 4% of book, which is about 6 lakh crore, is really the only way out. Stop here.
Thank you. Okay. I had a clarification question, but maybe later we'll come back to it. So let me turn over to our third panelist, Mr. Upasana Bhardwaj, who's Senior Economist and Senior VP at Kotak Mahindra Bank. Upasana.
Yes. Hi. Good evening, everyone. So I'll just start off with our expectations first. Clearly, it's a pause now, and in terms of repo rate, it is a pause now going ahead into the next 1 year, if I was to say. I think the bigger question here is about the operative target rate that we talk about. So in a typical normal year, we would look at a repo rate. But at this moment where we stand today, overall in the last 1 year, that is there between the operating target rate and the repo rate. And at this point, because we have reverse repo rate at 335, we have repo and overnight rates are at 321 to 325, below reverse repo. So first step is the RBI in terms of normalization of that distortion, we can say. And that is where I believe that RBI steps have to be more targeted towards getting the 320, 325 to a near 4% of next 1 year. Now that is in liquidity, especially, so 2-3 factors are playing out right now. We are looking at liquidity already. Structurally, we have very high liquidity because of RBI's intervention in the FX market. So up until now, we are in the 5.5 to 6.5 lakh crore liquidity surplus. Going ahead as well, the government does intend to spend, and the balance of payment also, because current account will remain more or less comfortable. Capital flows do appear to be continuing. So the external sector still looks to be quite good, which means that the pressure on rupee to appreciate remains intact, more or less. And in that context, what will RBI's FX management policy be, especially given that we already have structurally such a high level of liquidity? So that's where the RBI is probably constrained. And as we go ahead, it also will make a difference in terms of cost. I was talking about the bond markets, the supply that is there. So this entire gamut of issues which will be facing the RBI. One is normalization. That is not called tightening really, but it is normalization to pre-pandemic levels. So the overnight rates have to move towards 4%. That can happen ideally through withdrawal of liquidity. So in a year when we are talking about surplus balance of payment, RBI continuing its FX management the way it is, it is looking very difficult how RBI is going to absorb, because in an otherwise year we would have said OMO sale is the next option. So we can consider two options here, maybe MSS, which has been used in the past as well, or a SDF facility, which has again been talked about. SDF, which could be higher than the reverse repo rate, which is probably right now at 335. So SDF could come about in a 1 month or a 2 month bucket, or some kind of a tenor. See, at a 3.5% or whatever rate RBI defines it at. These are different ways in which we can manage liquidity and increase the rate. Even if quantum remains more or less the same, but the price of that liquidity starts getting elevated. So I think it's more about price versus amount. Amount will not be changing as much, but the price of that liquidity will, short-term liquidity will start getting available at little higher rates. And that is nothing but like also witnessed in the term reverse repo that we are seeing. Slowly, if we see the weighted average cost in the term reverse repo 2 that we've had till now, from a 3.46, now we are at 3.50. So we are already looking at that, a 14-day term reverse repo at a 3.5%. And with every fortnight, if we start seeing that inch higher, we are already kind of trying to normalize policy. So I think the way I look at this is clearly a pause right now in this policy, but what will be important to watch out for is the guidance of this normalization that I'm talking about. Somewhere there should be a little bit more clarity, but I must mention that it is not necessarily in the purview of the MPC. RBI can do it otherwise as well, because it's liquidity per se. So, it is not necessarily that they have to announce something during the MPC. It can come about in either time, before or after as well. Another important point I wanted to highlight was, for example, if I look at our inflation trajectory, if I exclude the base effect because of which towards the third quarter of FY 22, we will see, inflation probably dropping below 4%. If I exclude that part, more or less, I would say broadly, we are looking at a 4.5 to 5.5% range inflation. That looks comfortable, if I was to say, broadly. But having said that, the biggest question right now is, like I think Dr. Virmani also referred to briefly, was about when we review the 4% target plan. Are we concentrating on 4% as a medium term target, or we are okay with a sub 6% target? So if we were to go back to the older regime, and the focus was very clear, we were looking at inflation heading and trying to target moving towards 4%. Now, if we are okay with a 4%, then a different pace of normalization is required. But if we are okay with the current scenario of a 5% plus minus a little, then we need a much slower pace of normalization. That's how I would read this as. So it's about the comfort level of the MPC. About a 4% or a 5% is how I would want to look at this at this point in time, because liquidity is going to be ample. Withdrawal may not happen right away. I don't think they would want to disrupt it. Excessive bond supply in the market without RBI, we are looking at about, the ability of the markets to absorb. After looking at the ability of the markets to absorb, we still are looking at about 4.5 to 5 lakh crore of extra surplus supply. So that extra surplus has to be ideally taken away by the RBI. Unless, of course, one angle is there, the global bond index, if India gets included in, but that doesn't appear to be the case right away. But keeping that aside, what we need is RBI's presence to that extent. What that means is, again, further liquidity infusion, because FX related liquidity is already coming. So it is actually a problem of plenty at this point, which RBI will be facing. So it's going to be a very tricky task, difficult, but yet they will have to provide a clear guidance. If there is one option which I believe RBI can adopt is FX related liquidity which is getting infused. If RBI was to come out with a certain tool, whether it is SDF or a much more long-term reverse repo, and they kind of clarify that this is more like sterilizing the permanent liquidity infusion due to spot intervention, there could be a little bit better. Because if I was to look at the forward market, that is extremely distorted because of the RBI's presence. So there's a big distortion between the forward FX market and the money market rates, money market today. There is a lot of arbitrage that is happening. So all the markets seem to be dislocated, and somewhere in the course of next 1 year, I believe that normalization has to happen. And I will have to correct that anomaly. We cannot sustain this kind of an anomaly beyond 6 months or 9 months post-pandemic. Now we are into a really normal year. So this has to be normalized. So that's why short-term rates will have to be increased up about 65 to 75 basis. The long term will remain under pressure on supply concerns. But if RBI was to help come to some kind of a rescue, then we may see caps on the far end of the curve. Otherwise, I think across the curve, rates will remain elevated. In fact, for the corporate bonds, if we look at from December till now, December end till now, already 30-35 basis of increase in cost of borrowing has happened in the three-year AAA I'm talking about. Triple year, we've seen about 30-35 basis up move already because of RBI's announcement of the reverse repo, term reverse repo. And of course, now, if you look at how the GSEC curve has moved because of post-budget announcements. So we've already seen a significant up move up to the 3-year bucket. So I'd like to end here. Maybe we can take up questions later.
Thank you. I just want to say a couple of things on the foreign exchange, actually, because I was very succinct. Firstly, I've heard the governor clarify that that his statement has not, Indranil, you may want to note, his statement has not been quite rightly interpreted. He clarified that he is not making a statement on changing the broad approach which we have followed for decades, you know, which when I was there when we put in this policy or the narrative or statement, whatever you want to call it, that the RBI will not intervene to change the medium long-term rate or even try to resist that, but will intervene to stop volatility or to reduce volatility. So my understanding is that that basic the broad statement has not changed. So one would have to look very carefully at exactly what he said and not jump to the conclusion that that changed. The second point I'm making is, you know, of course, there is a pandemic stuff. You both of you know the details very, very well. But in a slightly post-pandemic situation, you know, where the you know, the point I've been making about survival and revival. So when the survival phase is clearly now more or less over and revival is maybe left for the contact services, but at some point when that part of the pandemic issue is over, then really and that detail, as I said, you people know much more the details, the micro detail, because it was important to have the micro detail right. But in a kind of beyond that stage, you have to be very careful, because one of the things is that if we are going to get large capital inflows driven by expectations of higher growth from structural changes, then you don't want to raise the rate, because you will just draw in more capital flows and shorter term capital flows. You just want to keep the long term one. So both that rate also becomes quite critical. You know, it's not just a matter of liquidity, but the short term I have no disagreement, because I'm sure you know much better than I do the details of the micro structure and all that stuff. But in that context, the RBI has to be very, very careful, and you know, because they have to look at the loop from both sides. You know, the liquidity, of course, when more capital comes in, then the long-term liquidity increases and sterilization has to be brought in and all that. That's the balance I was talking about. It'll become very tricky immediately after the kind of immediate pandemic effects are over. And in a way, I mean, to put it crudely, that is what the RBI is paid to make judgments about, and they'll have to do it. But of course, I understand the private market's perspective that you like to know some signaling or something on how they are going to manage it, because you have to plan your resources and investments. Okay, so I guess Mr. Abhik Barua is sick, so he won't be joining us. Okay, so then we, Charan, do you want to go as next, or you
Sure.
want to come last? Huh?
I'll go now, but I would
Okay,
like
so the next panelist is Dr. Charan Singh, Chairman, ASSOCHAM National Council for Banking, and of course the CEO of the eGrow Foundation, which, you know, your little form there is cut off at W. I'm just seeing eGrow. Okay, anyways, please go ahead.
So I must mention right at the outset that Abhik has sent his inputs, and the key input that he has sent is that he thinks it's time for a pause on the rate. So that was Abhik's contribution, and once we have it on our website, you will see his detailed note. As far as I am concerned, I agree with most of the things that have been said so far, that the interest rates, this is probably a pause time. And I would like to just reiterate, yes, the growth, there is little doubt as where are we going to end the year. And the next year, of course, as Dr. Virmani said, a double digit is what we are expecting. Of course, Indranil, different view on it, but there is certainly a very big uptick in the growth projection for 2021. Now, there's no doubt, as Indranil said, there could be a right push towards, if not this year, double digit. Next year, then IMF has predicted 6.8, but then Indranil is predicting 9. So that means there's a right push taking place. The key thing is that the revival, we are on the revival, and that everybody is acknowledging. And of course, we are going to be the fastest growing economy in the world for the next 2 years. Either way, right push or not the right push, that is what the picture is. Now, as far as inflation is concerned, yes, there is a little upside there which is happening. And I myself feel that things are tightening up. And as has been already said, there could be this pressure on the prices. Of course, this is the CPI that we are talking. On WPI, of course, I find there's much more easing there. Now, looking at the core industry indicators as well as the IIP, certainly, as was expected, there is a far big improvement happening on that front, and that will continue as the growth momentum takes place. So the policy rate already discussed around 4%, and the reverse repo is around 3.35%. The corridor is already pretty narrow there. That is okay. But if you look at the global interest rates, the policy rates, most of them are near zero now. And probably that is the key reason why such inflow is happening into the country, the capital flows. And I was looking at the trend of gold prices is going to be looking down. The prices of oil around 50, 55. That's the projection for the next 10 years. Now, the issue that I have in my mind is the gross fiscal deficit, of course, very transparently mentioned by the central government around 9.5%, and the next year going to be 6.8%. Will it be 6.8% or a little higher? We have just had the budget yesterday, and some estimates about the disinvestment may not be taking place, but therefore there's a probability that the gross fiscal deficit will be a little higher. This is only for the center. Now, if you put the states together, this is certainly going to be large. And why I want to bring that point is that the gross market borrowings of the center and state put together are expected to be very large. Of the center itself, if you see for 2019-20, the estimates were 6,24,000 crore. And for 2021, the budget estimates were 5,35,000 crore. We eventually ended up with 12 lakhs 7 12 lakh 73,000 crores, which is substantial one. In the ensuing year 21-22, we are budgeting 9 lakh 67,000 crores. This is just the center. And if we add the states, we can imagine that the market is going to be severely crowded out. So market borrowings are going to be very large, and there's going to be pressure on the interest rates. Now, as far as the banks are concerned, the Reserve Bank in its financial stability report has already mentioned that one can expect the NPS to be rising and to the extent of 14 to 15%, which is substantially large. And if the economy does not recover, God forbid, the second wave or the third wave, and we were together in a seminar just about a week back when Professor Hausman Ricardo of Harvard, while speaking at the EGRO, mentioned that one has to be very careful, and he especially gave country examples where the second or the third wave could come. And therefore, God forbid if that doesn't happen, good. But if that happens, we have to be prepared for it. Now, NPAs are rising, and in case something like that happens, the balance sheet of a commercial bank is basically a reflection, a mirror of what's happening in the economy. So there'll be further stresses. Capital adequacy ratios, of course, they are okay now, but as we know, the government has already budgeted recapitalization of 20,000 crore. But in addition to said, they have also said in case there is need, we are going to intervene and we are going to recapitalize if the requirement is there. So I agree with the assessment made by Ms. Upasana that when we are talking of the interest rates, we have to take into account the inflation targeting regime. In the current regime with 4 plus minus 2, we had some target in mind and the interest rate was taking that into account. But now, if we are going to move that, then obviously our interest instrument is also going to become either accommodative or more restrictive. And therefore, I'm personally of the view that inflation targeting in our country is not the right thing. Multiple indicator approach was the right thing. And why I say that is in a lengthy article, absolutely non-technical, written for the journal which comes from IGIDR, and Professor Ashima Goel is the editor of that macroeconomics journal. I argue that the demographic trends in the country, besides the supply side argument which has been given traditionally, but I bring in the demographic trend in the country such that we need to be far more accommodative in the monetary policy. And therefore, the tolerance limit of inflation is not necessarily 4%, it could be a little higher, but what is required is the emphasis on employment and growth. Now, be that be. Therefore, we will have to be very careful into what interest rate are we looking at, given what inflation target we are looking at. So I think there is a need, we need to pause there and wait for it. Now, I must also mention that I totally agree. There's so much of surplus liquidity into the system, and for various reasons, partly already discussed, was it because of the Forex operations? And also, what is the policy on the Forex that probably drives what is happening? I agree with that suggestion, which Madam Upasana has just made. Is there anything we can do to sterilize this extra flow, which is on account of the Forex? I think Dr. Reddy had once tried it, and that was quite successful. There was a separate window in which such money would be kept. I'm not sure if this is the time to try it, but certainly surplus liquidity does give confidence and faith to the normal banker. Now the issue is that in most of the banks, there is credit offtake, which is not taking place to the extent that we want. In case the economy recovers, this credit offtake will take place. In case the economy is still in a situation where it is jittery and little weak, this credit offtake is going to continue to be a challenge for the banker, whatever said and done. So therefore, I would conclude by saying that it is better to have an accommodative monetary policy. So they should continue with an accommodative stance, but there should be a pause on the repo rate for this time. By the start of the next year, the review on the MPC would have already been taken, and a view can be taken at that point of time if there is hardening of the inflation and the new interest rate, new inflation rate that we have decided upon or not decided upon, and then take a call in the direction of the interest rates. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Now our last panelist, Ms. Aarti Mattu, Chief General Manager, Punjab National Bank.
Hi, good evening. So I start with a basic premise that traditionally the monetary policy has always followed the fiscal policy of the country. And this time again, the fiscal policy is in an expansionary mode. So I will start with the fact that what we also expect is that RBI will continue to focus on the revival of the economy and boost consumption, just like what they have done throughout the pandemic. So the budget this time was focused on long-term growth, and RBI will be complementing it. So RBI is expected to keep the key policy rates unchanged. So we also would strongly recommend that and support the economic activity and to maintain the monetary accommodation. The room available for a further policy rate cut is very limited as the growth needs to be supported through the monetary policy this time too. In the last monetary policy in December, RBI had kept the repo rate unchanged while maintaining the accommodating stance. And this time also, we're expecting it to be on the same lines. And although the CPI inflation rate has dipped in December to about 4.69 compared to 7% plus 2 months back, the trajectory remains uncertain. The retail inflation measured by the consumer price index, which has eased to 4.59%, is mainly due to the decline in food prices, as other speakers have also reiterated. The retail inflation for November was 6.93. The core inflation, however, the core inflation rate has not come down and is hovering around 5.5%. It has come down from 5.9 to 5.7 and now 5.5. It has not come down as much as the CPI has come down. The excess liquidity needs to be watched, and the RBI would take key targeted measures to make the liquidity available to all NBFCs, especially the small and unrated ones who operate in this segment. On the GDP front, the Indian economy is expected, most of the projections are around 11%, which is close to the growth rate forecast of 11.5% made by the IMF. As per the data released by the MOSPI, the 2021 growth is estimated to be a minus 7.7% compared to the growth rate of 4.2% in 1920. The V-shaped economic recovery is due to the mega vaccination drive, robust recovery in the services sector, and the robust growth in consumption and investment. The recovery is also expected due to the resurgence in the high frequency indicators such as power demand, rail freight, e-way bills, GST collections, and the steel consumption. However, the vaccine availability is not going to impact the macro economy immediately, and clarity on the durability of the economic recovery is still awaited. The impact of the budget on the inflationary expectation is one thing to be watched out. The system liquidity is around the range of about 6 trillion. And with larger fiscal deficit in both FY21 and FY22, the question is its impact on the inflation. Going by the government borrowing expectations, while this could constrain the Monetary Policy Committee in cutting the rates further, as the inflation threshold 4% plus minus 2% range is under review, one may not be surprised if the threshold is revised upwards. This appears to be more plausible when the fiscal deficit target is set to be at about 4 to 5% for 25-26. At this point, I would also like to say about the HTM, what Indranil did mention. Even as a banker, what we feel is this enhancement in the HTM limit, which was to be up to March 21, we feel it is going to be continued because otherwise it does not make sense for any bank to be investing right now. And with the large government borrowing program coming in for the next year too. So what we feel is the liquidity is going to be kept at an easy level so that the government borrowing program gets through. Another point is about the CRR. The CRR the relaxation in the CRR by 1%, which was introduced sometime last year mid, was to get over by March this time. It was a limited period relaxation, and any increase in it would lead to a straightaway sucking out of the liquidity by about 4.43 trillion. But the way the liquidity needs to be managed in view of the government borrowing, we feel maybe this also would be extended, the relaxation, even though there is sufficient liquidity in the system right now. So the liquidity, we feel RBI would continue to maintain it at easy level so as to make it easier for the economy as well as the government borrowing program going ahead. So I think that is what I wanted to make stay right now, and we will be taking it along as the question and answers continue. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our panelist presentation. Charan, do you want to take over the questions? I don't know. Or do you want to call on anybody else to speak?
Sure, if you agree, we can open the house for any input.
But we'll close at 5:30 sharp, or earlier if there's no other discussion.
R.K. Anand has some observations to make. Can we request him to please go ahead? Mr. Anand? Mr. Anand? Mr. R.K. Anand?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Sir, in view of this debt-led growth strategy, and that too banking upon a very heavy debt sought out in the budget, this itself has a potential power to disrupt the interest rates, and the indication has already started by rising of the yield on bonds in the bond market. So one, as the view goes to insulate the banks from the market risk, HTM is most likely again going to be increased. One. Second is, now with this too much liquidity chasing too few physical goods, the rates of interest take the northward movement from here. So now onward, the real rate of interest is going to be challenged, which no policy planner can tolerate for a long. So as most likely is on the surface, this tolerance level of MPC is most likely to be upward, maybe 5 plus minus 2%, to maintain the necessity of keeping real rates of interest positive. Because whatever we do, we can't get the core inflation into control, because the commodity prices and the cost push inflation will keep on rising the prices. So these two things are there. So currently, to support the fiscal policy of the government, pause on the rate, but going forward, there is a likelihood of 75 basis increase in rate of interest in FY22, in which 25 basis may occur in the Q2, that is by the end of September, and 50 basis in the H2 of FY22. So that is the overall scenario emerging. So I think MPC will take a call on this, and this reconstituted level of the tolerance is most likely to happen. And I think that will be the prime driver for the interest rates in future. So this is one thing. And second is the enhanced risk of market risk on the balance sheets of the banks, public sector banks particularly, because they keep a lot of GSEC. And now government program of borrowing to get through, the HTM definitely needs to be revised upward with a heavy hand. So that's my intake, sir. Thank you.
Question by Jesh Kumar. Can Jesh Kumar please ask your own question?
Hi, I have a different take question actually. This is more on the need for banks to shift towards Ind AS framework, similar to what large NBFCs have already done. Given that bank NPA to be taken care of with the bad loan ARC and AMC, what is the panel members' take on this? And the second question was on this short-term rates, especially when the large government borrowing is to be supported, as well as there is a likelihood of FX intervention on a higher end. Do you think that Operation Twist kind of a framework will be helpful in managing the yield? So any panel member can take this question.
Yeah, on your second question, I would say that Operation Twist will be much more aggressively used into next year as well. Only thing is, we have to look at how the T-bill issuances be, because this year what's happening is RBI was purchasing T-bills and then doing an Operation Twist in the dated segment. If you see, most of the times that's what's happened. Going into next year, for now at least, they've budgeted about 50,000 crore. The government has budgeted about 50,000 crore as T-bill issuances. But still, in the secondary market, RBI can do its bit and manage the Operation Twist. We will have to see. It probably serves two objectives. The shorter end of the curve comes higher, so somewhere the policy normalization, which I was referring to earlier, so the shorter end of the curve goes even higher, and somewhere they're able to. So Operation Twist can continue to remain as a tool.
And anyone on the first question?
Could you repeat the first question once again?
See, what is your take on the banks shifting to Ind AS, given that large NBFCs have already done that and there is not much of a distinction reported? Do you think the banks are ready to shift to Ind AS? And if not, then what are the hindrances?
So, beyond a point, obviously, I think it's better that the bankers on the panel answer rather than the markets.
Ms. Mattu wants to answer.
Yeah,
that.
I'll give my personal take on it, not my bank's take on it. The basic thing is there's still a lot of key areas on which the clarity has not yet come from the regulator, how they're going to be interpreted when we move on. Yes, going ahead, I think Ind AS is something we would need to be moving into. Like, it's only, we've been given a little leeway in terms of the other developments in the economy. But till those key, it is anyway more transparent, but till the key issues are not yet defined by the regulator, I think we would not be in a position to move on the same.
No, I understand that there is a clarity required from the RBI side in terms of the framework and the timeline. My question was more towards likelihood of a bank's preparedness, given that there is in the economic survey, there was a lot of question raised on the another AQR kind of a requirement. So wouldn't that help if the bankers were to shift?
See, the bankers anyway are doing, there's a parallel run happening simultaneously. Like, we are reporting to the regulator as every quarter the results to the, so the bank, the readiness is almost there, but there should not be any issue once there is more stability in the system.
Thank you.
Which Madam Mattu is making is that the readiness is there, but the transition needs time, and that is what is being availed of. The regulator is very much aware of it, And I think within the time frame, whenever the regulator desires, that shift will take place, but it will be taking place in a cautious manner. Is that right, Madam Matu? Yeah, that's exactly
Very
what
well said, Singh. Very well said.
that's my take on the subject. Now,
Totally endorse it.
Mr. Anand had raised a few issues. If anybody wants to take those. Mr. Anand, do you want to elaborate
can you
on
repeat
that?
some questions? I'm not able to recollect the questions. Yeah.
No, the points were just the observations made on the emerging scenario that now the banks get more prone to the market risk, particularly on their GSEC investments. So the HTM limit going higher is the first probability. Second is the structural change in the tolerance level of the MPC itself by March, raising the bar of 4% to 5% plus 2 minus 2% is necessary with a view to maintain the positivity in the real rates of interest, because inflation in any case is pushed up by the core inflation. And the going forward, too much money chasing too much physical goods also, because output levels are low, a lot of liquidity, but the production capacities are getting utilized so low. So inflation from the cost push side is also expected. So this is an imminent possibility that the tolerance level gets revised on the upward side. And for the time being, since as the speakers all are in sync, the monetary policy remains, I think, in the sync with the fiscal policy and adopts pause for the time being. But later on, going forward in FY22, there is seen a possibility of increase in the rates of interest, particularly H2 of the FY22, where at least 50 basis point seems to be a very reasonable calculation, going by the inflation rising from the second quarter of the FY22 onwards. So these are the possibilities, and then the lot of financing of the growth happening through debt will keep the rates of interest on the ground elevated throughout. So it will give very less room to the monetary policy to play now on that side. So I think the lot of incentives will be required from the fiscal side, as they have tried to do, but I think more will be seen as we go forward for the supporting manufacturing sector to come back. Because right now banks will face the issue of the very low debt service coverage ratio by the entrepreneurs, because the cash flows with the entrepreneurs are almost negative or so low that the debt servicing is a problem. And with Supreme Court stalling the banks from recognizing the possible NPAs as NPAs for the time being, when all this get added to the book of the NPA, because very less parties are opting for restructuring. So this is in itself is a cost raising issue for the banks, and they're constrained to reduce the rates of interest. So now onward, I think we mark this policy a directional change to set for the northward movement in the rates of interest. So that's all from my side.
Sure. There's a question from Nitya Kalyani. If you want to ask that question yourself.
Good evening, panel members. I just wanted to ask, what is the take on the panel, like on the inflation rate for the next upcoming 5 years? now that March 21, the last 5 years inflation rate is being consumed. Now I want to know what will be the rate for the upcoming 5 years, keeping in view this pandemic and the decelerated market.
Are you asking the panel's view on the expected inflation target?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My view on that is I don't want the inflation target to be there at all, as I argued, and also mentioned to my article in the journal, which comes from IDIDR. But for the other panelists, we are open. I leave it to Indranil and Madam Upasana and Madam Matu. I don't see our chairman, Dr. Virmani, but if he's there, he can share his view. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, I can just start with. If you're talking about the inflation target, whether that's going to be retained at 4 or not, is that your question? Or it should be retained or not? Is that what your question?
Whether it should be, or is it possible to be retained at 4, or it is likely to?
So my sense is it should continue to remain where it is. We have a reasonable buffer of 2% in a normal year. So, we should ignore pandemic year because obviously there are different kind of situations which come about, and hence inflation tends to overshoot or undershoot in either directions. But leaving aside such kind of unprecedented events, 4% plus minus 2% is a reasonable buffer that we have. And given that we have a flexible inflation targeting, it is not a point level, we should try and utilize whatever leeway we have within that bracket. So the question here is, typically, if we look at how the different governors view this differently. So the idea has been always trying to give a medium-term target of 4%. So when we give that kind of a direction to policy, then every policy measure should be based on the fact that if inflation is above 4%, then should we be if it's marginally above 4%, it's okay to be in a neutral zone. But if it is significantly higher than 4%, then we need to act accordingly to ensure inflation falls back to 4%. The question here is now, in the current regime, my sense is even a 5% is getting accepted. So it is not about moving the median. Using that 4 to 6% band is something which be clarified better in this new MPC framework that we will be seeing a revised one. So maybe that is something which can come about as clarity, because it's pointed always towards 4% or the buffer of the flexibility that we have of 2% plus or minus. That's where we've seen mostly, if you see, the MPC can always argue that they've, apart from very brief blips here and there, they have managed to stay within that target. So my point is, just don't try and be sticky about the 4%. Try and use a leeway wherever there's possible on either direction. When there's a slowdown, accordingly. When there's when the growth is very high, then accordingly. Use the leeway accordingly. So let's not be sticky about 4. But yes, I think the 4% plus minus should remain. I don't really see any reason why we should revise that by a 50 basis up move or something. I mean, that doesn't really achieve anything. It's just a number.
Yeah. So so I think that the reason you set an inflation target is that you want to be at a threshold inflation, that is inflation that maximizes growth. Now, for years, there were various studies which suggested that the threshold inflation for WPI was somewhere between 4.6 to 5.5, which is why the RBI said, okay, we'll work with 5. Now, the threshold inflation for CPI, if you go by the Patel Committee report itself, is between 6.2 to 6.7. Now, if we look at inflation, the behavior of inflation from maybe 14, 15 till today, or maybe from 2016 to today, it is true that inflation may have averaged 4%, but growth clearly has gone way below the 7% potential that we probably have. So I think it's therefore easy to say that 4% was not the threshold inflation, and the statistical and empirical work by the Patel committee did not find it so. So I think that I understand that you don't want to bless 6% plus minus 2 because then you kind of say that even 8 is all right. But then maybe you say 2 to 6 and not fixate on that 4, because if you see till some time back you were trying to buy 4% inflation by keeping agricultural prices low. So that then goes and distorts the agricultural terms of trade and leads to other issues, farm loan waivers, this, that, and the other. So I think somewhere there has to be at least a theoretical work to find out what is currently threshold CPI inflation before you fix a target. So that's number one. And secondly, I think that I fully agree with Mr. Das that you should have a 3-pronged objective: growth stability, price stability, and financial stability. Because that I think is best. And and what he says that irrespective of what the mandates are, financial stability has always been a matter of concern. So I am fairly I think even when we were in a multiple indicator approach, when Dr. Jalan was RBI governor, Dr. Virmani was chief economic advisor, we still had an inflation target, 5% inflation target. It's not as if we didn't have an inflation target, but we had multiple indicators. So that's my view.
Ms. Mattu, would you like to add something?
I totally endorse what Upasana just said, that basically it's just a number. Finally, it's what is the comfort. You're just enhancing the the corridor upwards does not get basic. You have to see how it's going to be impacting your economy going ahead. It's just you are drawing comfort from a number, whereas the ground reality could be different. So keeping it at the same level would make more sense. It doesn't help in any way going ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I think I like the way Indranil put it, that instead of focusing on the 4 and kind of adding on plus minus whenever it goes outside, if you focus on the 2 to 6%, that's a good way to resolve the flexibility also. So one can think of a kind of graph of 2 to 6% here, and then GDP growth on the other axis, and then you can be more comfortable looking at both to some extent. On the other, so that broadly is I think agreed. Of course, the financial stability thing came back with a bang after the global financial crisis and the whole world. I was at the IMF, so the question was how to build that into the structures. And I think only the practical issue that extra, except in the crisis, of course, crisis is one thing, but in kind of normal fluctuations, the issue is of severe deflation or severe inflation. When you have a crisis, of course, as I suggested, I think it's worth thinking that really these rules should temporarily it should be understood that as long as, especially in a developing country, if the GDP growth is below the peak, that's a severe. I mean, you don't need any more finer point. That's a severe crisis for a developing country. I mean, in a developed country, you may get plus and minus going to 0 or little minus many quarters, but generally in developing countries, including or even middle income countries, that's generally a big crisis. So but yeah, all these ideas are useful, and I hope if there is a debate, it will be taken account of. So the thing to remember is the flexible, and then not make a drastic change. I mean, you can increase the flexibility in the way one views it. We have 3 minutes, but so I think unless there's Charan, you think there's any serious question, I will just kind of sum up and end. Hello?
question from Shikhar Sharma.
Yeah. Okay. Last question then. Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to ask yourself, or should I just speak? The question is, since inflation is above RBI's target level, so how will the situation be controlled?
So we think
Arvind,
we're going back to RBI's target.
Yeah, Arvind sir, good afternoon to all the wonderful panelists. And indeed, it is a burning question when the RBI gives a stance of keeping the rates at a pause. And that is what is basically being envisioned for the current, the monetary policy for 5th of February. So then how will everything be under control then?
Indranil, you were saying something?
No, I'm saying that inflation has fallen back to RBI's trajectory. So, and is likely to remain there at least for the rest of this year. So I think that there could be threats to inflation next year from rising money supply, which is why we think that, banks HTM limits to avoid monetization. But right now, inflation is back.
Okay, so that's a very clear answer there. What Indranil is saying, it is under control. So the question of controlling it, in future or what the RBI will do. So that is why there is a clear consensus. It turns out this time there is no difference of opinion at all that the RBI will, should, and most likely will continue the pause. And that's precisely what all of us have been kind of saying in different ways, starting with my introductory stuff, which is that the issues are really in the future. And, the pandemic, for example, the issue of the deficit for next year, the growth rate, we still are not 100% sure what the current growth rate is going to be. I mean, I think Indranil is still sticking to 7%, -7, you said? There are some people, I heard Morgan Stanley. Yeah. I think you said
-6.7.
-6.7, right. Morgan Stanley is saying -6.5. So really, unless we are sure about what happened, and that happening will end in March 31st at least, before 1st April, we don't really know what is the exact number for the current year. I mean, you're in the middle of it right now. So, and especially in a situation of shocks, sometimes it's better not to get overexcited. I mean, the whole point is managing risk and shocks and uncertainty. You have to kind of set aside your normal thinking cap and think about the new situation more carefully. So it's very careful. This is something one has learned from, I've been involved in all the crises which have hit India. We had 3 years of discussions in the IMF on how the crisis hit the whole world, etc. And especially in pandemic, which is a once in 100-year crisis. And really, we were struggling. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, EGRO, we started doing research on the spread of the pandemic from, I think, March or so, and wrote 2 papers on it. But one has seen firsthand, in detail, how the knowledge just about the spread of the coronavirus has accumulated over time. I mean, we were completely ignorant in the beginning. Then there were stories about some ships which were offshore in Japan. Then there were some information we got from Korea where the pandemic spread in a church and so on. And I'm just giving these as illustrations that the science of the coronavirus was not known. We've learned about it. So in these sort of situations, you have to kind of open your mind and not just stick to what you learned, how to handle normal situations. Anyway, with that, let me end. I have other meetings. So thank you, everybody. Charan, you want to give the outline of what is maybe your future programs?
Yeah, sure. I must thank all the participants and the panelists to join us in the EGRO Shadow Monetary Policy Committee, which we do along with ASSOCHAM. I want to thank ASSOCHAM for hosting us and hosting the event today. Just want to make one announcement that on Friday, February 5, we are having a detailed discussion on the union budget. So you're all welcome from SHM and EGRO to please join in that discussion. We have an expert panel from across the country. With this, once again, let me thank everybody, the SHM for hosting us, and the panelists and the participants. The recording of today's will be available on our website and SHM's, I think, website tomorrow. And also the recommendations in nutshell would be there on the EGRO's website by tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.